Madam President.
Senator from Indiana.
Thank you. I come here probably more than any other senator on this topic of budgets, and it ought to be called the lack of budgets. And thank goodness, currently, we've got the blueprint out there in black and white for what we intend to do, the president intends to do, and is going to try to sell it to the American public. We've been on this pathway for decades. The Reagan years, we talked about enlivening the economy by bringing taxes down, letting people keep more of their own resources. That worked. I think that still makes sense. It works in most states. It was driving the economy with that dynamic pre-COVID. But what we did lose along the way is that regardless of our revenues, which stubbornly average 17 to 18% of our GDP, because when you raise rates, people don't produce as much. There's not as much income to tax. When you lower them, you get more revenue to tax, and you actually are gaining more revenue for the government to boot. So we were there pre-COVID. We only need to look to see what was working just a year and a half or two ago. It was the best the economy was doing. It was raising wages. We all should be interested in doing that, but not through government, through the productive private economy. It was raising it in places that we'd never been able to do it before. So rather than throw that blueprint out the door and go with something like this that has never worked in the past, whenever you get government becoming that large a part of your economy, and it used to be 20%, even though we were only taking in 17 to 18%, regardless of the tax rates in our own government revenue, we got used to running deficits. That's what happened somewhere decades ago, and we've all gotten used to it. And if you want to see a budget that takes that theory, that it doesn't make any difference how much more you spend than you take in, this is it. If you like it, it's the best budget we've ever done. We shouldn't be calling it budgets again, because budgets mean that you live within your means from year to year, like all other entities do. State governments do it. Some that don't generally have issues in their own state economies. But we cannot take all these resources from the private sector, run it through government with the inefficiency that comes along with that, and expect to have a good outcome. Senator Grassley was here earlier, Senator Portman. They gave you a bunch of the statistics. I'm going to describe how this shipwreck ends up on the shore over time. And it's just a question of how much we buy into this as a way that we need to run our government, which has not worked over the last 2 decades, from the Gulf Wars, from all the stuff that we try to do through government that we at least used to have pay-fors. The biggest drivers of our current deficits, nobody wants to talk about. It's Medicare, Social Security. We've known that the Social Security Trust Fund was going to go bust decades ago, and it's going to happen here in a little over a decade. And will we do anything to try to change it? That takes political will. Been here a little under 2.5 years, have not found a lot of that. The bigger driver of our structural deficits would be a broken health care system. I, more than any other senator, have talked about that, but not solving it through more government, reforming health care to make them become a true industry that believes in transparency, competition, get the health care consumer involved. We could fix that part of it. Can't get any interest even in my own party for much of that, because we defend a broken healthcare industry. We don't ask them to be transparent, competitive, engage the consumer like most other industries do, and do well and provide a good service to the American consumer. So, government will end up doing what it always does. It's so easy to borrow from others, spend the money, and you're going to have a sugar high. You're going to feel good, but there's going to be indigestion down the road. And the way it's going to end up is we're going to have calamities within our credit markets. We're going to have people no longer willing to lend us money. We've now taken these trillion-dollar deficits, and they're going to be closer to $1.5 trillion. And this new budget, again, I hate even calling it a budget, is going to add to that, not lessen it. And when you talk about raising revenues, there's even anxiety on the other side of the aisle, because raising taxes never goes well. It generally is tough to get everybody to agree on it, and that means our deficits are going to even be larger. So, is it going to take us to completely deplete the Social Security Trust Fund that we've been paying into since the 30s? Is it going to take depleting the Medicare Trust Fund, which now happens in 5.5 years? And is the American public going to allow us here to keep spending more money than we take in year after year and end up to where the Chinese won't lend us any money down the road? Others won't as well, because our interest is going to be about as much as we pay for defense, and then you're going to have a calamity, and you can blame it on everyone here that thinks this feels good now. When you want to feel good in the future, you make hard decisions in the present. Any well-run organization, any well-run state or local government makes those tough decisions in the short run so they don't have to solve things through a calamity in the long run. I yield the floor.
Madam President.